Well, hello, everyone. My name is Nick Masuda. I'm the managing editor of the Post and Courier Myrtle Beach and Georgetown Times. I can't thank you enough. It looks like there's a couple hundred of you that signed up to listen to us talk about Horry County Schools. And before I get too far, I want to make sure that my right hand gets a chance to introduce herself.
Thanks, Nick. First, welcome everyone. We're so glad you're here. My name is Hannah Strong, and I'm the growth reporter here in Myrtle Beach. We have a lot to unpack today, so I'll hand it back over to you, Nick, to get us started.
Absolutely, and a couple of house cleaning things. If you have a question during this session, feel free to use the Q&A section, submit there. I have it up on my screen. If it makes sense to jump in with a question while we're talking, we'll do so. If not, we'll address as many as we can at the end. I know we got dozens of questions coming into this session. So much of them deal with things that we're actually working on currently. So I will definitely be circling back with individuals on a lot of those questions. But the reason why we wanted to kick off this beyond the headline series was here in Myrtle Beach with the Horry County Schools is because there's nothing more important than our children, nothing more important than thousands of employees. And we get asked so often, why Horry County Schools? Why are you focusing so much? And, it comes back to a simple number. That's 45,000 students. It's, upwards of 6, 7, 8,000 employees. It's the impact that has on parents and guardians throughout our community. And so really there's nothing more important. And when you look at how last school year ended, the 2019-2020 school year, there were so many question marks. Heading into last summer, it was a desert. You really had no idea which way you were supposed to go. And when we looked at that 4.5 months, a lot of questions came to our minds in terms of what had been happening during those 4.5 months and how was it going to proceed. I mean, this is an unprecedented type of school year. And, what is the third largest school district in the state going to do with it? And so we felt like as a public safety, as a public service, it was very important for us to focus on Horry County Schools. And from there, we've developed tons of relationships. And so as the editor, it came down to 4 different pillars that we really kind of use to justify doing stories. The first is transparency. The second is curriculum. The third is safety. And then the fourth is the school board responsibility. And kind of circling back to transparency, that really just meant to us, how open was the district going to be with not just us, but also with the community about the information that they had? What was the curriculum going to look like for those who were in school or those who were staying at home through HCS virtual? And what were the disparities there? What was being learned during this first semester and into the second semester? Safety is a pretty simple topic nowadays. And so we felt a responsibility to make sure that we inform people in real time about decisions that were being made and letting people make their own decisions based off of those pieces of information. And then ultimately, as we do with any government body, it's very important for us to hold those responsible that are elected. Those that we trust with our vote when it comes to going to the ballot box, and we trust those folks. It's very important for us to make sure that whatever they promise that they follow through on. Obviously, during a pandemic, things obviously had to adjust, but what they believe in and what they stand for and what their individual districts stand for hasn't changed all that much. So we have to make sure that we're holding them accountable and responsible. So we're going to kick into a little Q&A between Hannah and I because we've shared this beat so much. And so I felt like it was important for us to kind of give you a glimpse as to how we've navigated this year and how we look at doing this moving forward, especially now that Hannah's moved over into the growth reporter, which still has a big impact on HCS. So to kick it off, Hannah, take people through July and August. We're sitting there in the newsroom, brand new newsroom. We didn't launch our first print product till August 5th. We're sitting there and we're thinking about what can we do to help parents? What can we do to help teachers? What can we do to help students? Take people through the conversations that we had.
Sure. So when we started in July and early August, we really hit the ground running. There was so much to report. It was new territory for us to report, new territory for the school district as they were navigating a new year. Nick touched on it earlier, but at the end of last school year, things in person ended pretty abruptly, and teachers and principals were forced to just kind of finish out the school year strong remotely. So the district had some time over the summer to really reflect how they were going to go into a new school year with the pandemic. And so, people were forced with trying to figure out if they were going to put their students or their kids in brick and mortar or do virtual. And I think that's when we first started really hearing from parents and the struggle of trying to figure out what they were going to do. So, Nick, you had a story early on about the plight of some parents and just the struggle to figure out what to do. And certainly we understood the chaos, but what stood out to you that prompted further questioning at that point?
Sure. As a parent of a student myself, I have I don't know if it's the fortune or the misfortune at times of seeing things through the lens of a parent and seeing the emotions that come in, with every decision you make. And when it comes to their safety, it's, you take a lot of responsibility with every single decision. So as a journalist, it felt important to me to make sure that we were understanding what parents were going through. And I was able to, one really stood out to me is a mom that was basically told that she had to go find a library in order for her, I believe was a second grader, to have to do his work because she didn't have Wi-Fi at home. And how she was treated during the moment by the district really tipped me off to the fact that things were beyond chaos. They were unorganized. And, yes, there's a lot of you've got to give them a lot of credit for the fact that they were dealing with things on the fly. But ultimately, how you treat the people that you're serving is very important. And so seeing that really tipped me off to thinking, you know what, there's a bigger story here. There's something that we're going to definitely have to continue to look into. And whether that was parents, teachers, counselors, whomever it was, we were definitely going to have to keep that connection to that side, because it's so easy as a journalist to get caught up into what you see at a school board meeting or what you get in a press release. But as journalists, our responsibility is to tell the whole 360. We got to make sure that every side is represented, and that includes the district. And as you well know, we ask them every time we report on something. We ask them questions, and whether they choose to respond or not, that's up to them. But we make sure that we're always very fair, and we pride ourselves on being down the middle. But there's emotions involved with everything, and so really feeling that from the parents gave me just that heads up that I needed, that, hey, listen, this is going to be serious and we need to devote more resources, which is why you and I started tag teaming a lot of stories, because it was too big for one person to truly get all the reaction that we needed. And so there was a time in September where we started hearing some rumblings about a different opt-in, where parents could change their mind about the type of schooling that their child was going to have. Talk to us a little bit about how we found that out and what that was like once it was revealed. What doors opened?
Sure. So at the beginning of the school year, parents and students could either choose virtual or hybrid, and that was going to be their year-long commitment. Once they chose whichever program, they had to stick to it. After the school year started, the district reopened that transfer, so those in hybrid could transfer to virtual if they wished, or virtual could transfer to hybrid. What we saw was, based on the numbers, was a lot of elementary age students in the virtual program transferring back to hybrid. I think a lot of parents were having a hard time with that age level being at home all the time. And that was just a struggle for parents. And this at this point, we were really starting to hear from teachers and their struggles through that as well. And so, Nick, I don't know if you want to touch on the first time you kind of started hearing from teachers through this and what you were hearing.
Yeah, that side of that world, wasn't necessarily open to us initially, especially with what I found out quickly was that there was a fear of speaking out and letting people know what's going on inside the walls. And really what prompted that was this decision to change course. Many teachers, at least in those that I talked to, and I've talked to dozens, they committed to a school year based off of the plan that was put out there in August. And so when they reached this point, and all of a sudden their lives are going to change again. And these people have beyond just their classrooms to worry about. They have their folks that they're going home to, and the health risks that are involved with walking into a classroom every day. They felt like, well, you're changing course midway and we don't understand why. They were questioning, why is this happening? Yes, September and October were better in terms of COVID in the community. Um, but everybody knew that the holidays were coming up. And so they felt like their voices weren't being heard. And when a body of people doesn't feel like they're being heard, they need to reach out somewhere. And so initially we did do a lot of anonymous reporting that was obviously fact checked beyond belief. But that was out of protection for people who felt like the public needed to have information they weren't getting otherwise. And obviously over time that has changed in terms of many teachers speaking out just because they feel like it's the right thing to do. And I felt very fortunate, I know you do too, to be able to be the person on the other end of the phone or the other end of a Zoom to hear what's going on and to be given information that we can go and fact check. And um, it, it, it was eye opening, but that decision to switch midstream, seemingly made by one person because the school board had basically allowed one person in Dr. Maxey to make these decisions. Um, it was something that teachers questioned because they didn't understand why it was happening. And so I thought it was an opportunity for us to tell that story, to showcase the butting of heads that was happening within the district. And ultimately, it's still playing out to today in terms of how employees, not just teachers, how employees feel. And so, that kind of segues into something that we did as a staff. Um, Tell me, so back in the day, when we were first talking in July before we both joined the Post and Courier, I don't think I ever asked you about covering football, but you did, and kind of tell the group why that came to be.
So we as a staff basically were going out on Friday nights to the different football games that were at home in Horry County. And we were really just looking to see not who was scoring or what was happening on the field, but we were kind of looking the other way in the stands. We were seeing if the proper signage for social distancing was posted, if people were wearing masks, if people were congregating in groups at the concession stand, things like that. And I will say there were some schools that were not following the protocol, and there were people sitting in the seats in the stands that were marked to not sit in for social distancing purposes. But there were some schools that were following the rules, and I remember I'll never forget one time I saw a principal reminding cheerleaders to put their masks on. So we saw both sides to that.
And to kind of piggyback off of that, the original reason why we launched the Friday Night Lights Unmasked series was because we felt that there were rules put into place. And, as we try to teach all of our children, rules are to be followed. And yes, if rules need to be broken, that needs to be a transparent, publicly known aspect. And we did witness a lot of schools breaking the rules. And again, we weren't the ones writing the rules, even though we got plenty of hate about us being there to kind of be I don't know, mask monitors of sorts. And that wasn't our role. Is that once you, just like inside of a school, if you set rules as a parent, you expect that those rules are going to be followed. As a teacher, you expect that those rules are going to be followed. That's how we coach our children. And so when you put rules in place for football, which is infinitely not necessary. I'm the biggest athletic nut. I played 26 years of baseball. I played football, basketball, the whole deal. I love sports. But when it's not life or death, but you are putting children in a life or death situation because of the pandemic, it's important that rules are followed. And so it was important to us, again, from a public safety and public health standpoint, to make sure that we were out there. And we were there. We were there in person, not watching on any type of video. We were there taking photos, doing our thing. We cared about the football, but ultimately we cared more about protecting the football players. And the football coaches and those who were doing it right on the field, but were impacted by those above them in the stands that weren't following the rules. And so it was just important for us to let people know that that was going on so they can make their own best decision.
Right. So speaking of safety, when we got to kind of the end of the semester, November and early December, we started hearing about plexiglass being installed. That conversation was really ramping up. Obviously, the school district was given money from the South Carolina Department of Education to purchase the plexiglass. And then the school district was in charge of providing the funds to install the glass. At that point, we wrote a story about the effectiveness of the plexiglass. And Nick, you got an expert to talk. Can you talk about why it was important to talk to an expert?
Yeah, and I think that there's plenty of experts in South Carolina too. But our perspective on this story was that there were other cities and other states who had already kind of surpassed where we were at currently, and already had dealt with this. And so, how did they deal with it? And talk to people about, is plexiglass truly impactful? Is it, yes, the $3.8 million by the state that was spent on it, had to be used about getting kids back into the classroom. Yes, that was a prerequisite. It wasn't a prerequisite that it had to be plexiglass. So there are other ways that you can try to attempt to get the kids back into the classroom. And then the $1.2 million used on the HCS side, that could have been used for other things. And so to look at that amount of investment and then go, okay, wait, does this truly protect teachers and students? And finding out that really plexiglass in general is mostly a placebo effect. It mostly doesn't do much, especially with airborne diseases like COVID-19. And that more efforts being put into social distancing and masking and looking at innovative solutions about being outside in tents and doing different things where there's less risk for everybody involved, that was important. And then it also opened up the door into something that is so important moving forward, is the issue of mold within the classroom too. You combine mold with COVID-19, you're dealing with something that is deadly. And it is something that parents and teachers should be worried about. There's a reason why the district is facing a handful of lawsuits over the mold issue. And that is something that came out of that story. And it was amazing to see some people step forward to speak about that. And that's something that, as we move forward, and I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit here, is something that in order to exact change, people have to stand up. And as the Post and Courier, our job is to make sure we're putting facts out there. If those facts, impact change, then we're all about it. And so this story allowed us to at least put information out there for people to digest. And again, they can interpret however they see fit. But we wanted to make sure that we had opinions and facts from those who have already experienced it where we hadn't. So
I think that was another point where we started to hear from teachers a lot, and just outspoken employees in general. Why was that important to our coverage?
what kind of touched on it in terms of, you know, employees are the ones that are inside the walls. And to have that opportunity to interface with folks who are seeing it day in and day out, that's the kind of unfiltered transparency that I believe every parent wants. That's not political. That's just like what's going on with my kid's school. And I believe everybody has an interest in that. That is not political. That is unilateral. It's something that we all care about. So I believe that during this time, employees had had enough. They had seen enough fact in order for them to truly go, you know what? I'm tired of this. I have to speak out. I have to let my parents know. I have to let other parents know. This is what I am seeing. And none of them to a T ever said that everybody's experiencing this. But in their world, which involves dozens upon dozens upon dozens of students, this is what they were seeing. And then what happened was a domino effect. Teachers from another school, teachers from another school, teachers from another school, counselors, paraprofessionals, bus drivers. I've heard from every aspect of the district. They're all repeating very similar things. And so it added up to a situation where is safety being put at the forefront? And that can't come from you and I, because we're not inside the schools. We're not allowed inside the schools. But those who are on the inside, they can reveal, hey, listen, this is what we're dealing with. And sometimes it's great and sometimes it's not so great. But our job as journalists is to make sure that information's out there.
Absolutely.
So kind of speaking of safety and things that we've worked on behind the scenes and revealing information, you've been dealing with something for a couple months now that involves a FOIA request. What tell our audience a little bit more about what's involved there and why sometimes it takes us a long time to get information.
Sure. So obviously, a big part of our job is attending public meetings and reporting on the decisions that public officials are making. But the other part of our job is really digging into more public documents that aren't necessarily presented at these public meetings. And we do that through Freedom of Information Act requests. That's a mouthful. Um, so I submitted a FOIA request to the school district at the end of last year, 2020. And it was requesting emails from district officials regarding COVID-19 and just how the district was handling it. So when we finally heard back from the school district, we were told that it was going to take 6 months to get this information, and our request yielded over 100,000 emails. And the district wanted $25,000 for this FOIA request to be fulfilled. Um, I'll tell you all, in my time as a journalist and the dozens of FOIA requests that I've submitted, I've never received a quote that high for public information. Um, so Nick, if you could just kind of talk about how we handle that and just how we handle FOIA requests in general.
Sure, and FOIA is common lingo amongst us because there's times where information isn't readily available or is not wanted to be readily available, and we have to go through a process. That process can take up to 40 days, and so there are times where requesting that information actually is outside the window of whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And then when you look at a request that's surrounding an issue like COVID-19, and then you get a $25,000 price tag on it. That information is critical to what we want to do, but at the same time, the $25,000 is a boulder to allowing us to actually do the work that we need to do to inform the public the proper way. And that's one reason why, which is really cool about the Post and Courier, is that we're always invested in investigative journalism. And so actually recently we started actually doing the investigative journalism fund, for lack of a better way of putting it. It's basically an opportunity to donate to allowing us to do further work. And actually one of the pillars and one of the verticals that we're going to use is actually education, because we feel like the status of education in the state is so critical. And so as we move forward, we want to dig deeper and deeper and deeper, because we feel like it can make an impact, and not just here, but around the state, in Charleston and Columbia and Greenville. With us being statewide now, we feel like through collaboration with our communities, that we can impact how children are taught. And I think that that's ultimately the goal of everybody, to make sure that our children are getting the very best, that our teachers are getting the very best, that they're being heard, that their knowledge is actually out there. And so what we hope to do through this fund is to allow us to make sure we get this information out there. So the last thing I kind of want to touch upon is it takes a village in order to create a system of accountability. And that's the reason why HCS has become so important to us, is that we want to make sure that everything that's out there, every parent feels like that they're getting real information in real time that they can act upon. And between Hannah and myself, we definitely burn the candle at both ends in order to make that happen. We're going to continue to do so. But that takes the entire community stepping up and demanding answers. And that's what we're going to continue to do, which kind of segues into the fact that what we're going to do moving forward. I think it's so important for you guys to understand what we're looking at in the next phase of what we're doing. And for Hannah, growth is going to be a big part of that, and growth is huge with HCS. So Hannah, why don't you kind of speak to the impact that growth will have on the school system?
Sure. So I shifted into the growth beat about 2 months ago, and education absolutely intersects with growth. I think a lot of us will hear growth as a term in our coverage and think businesses or think new neighborhoods and developments and traffic that's coming to the area due to the growth. But as the families come to the area, their children come with them too, and their children absolutely need a spot in our public schools. So, my part of the growth beat will definitely be looking at the new schools that will be built in the area, definitely in the Carolina Forest area that is growing by the minute, it seems. We know that the school district has property in that area and they plan to build a new school at some point. That will be part of my coverage going forward. We don't yet know if it's going to be elementary, middle, or high, but that will definitely be, what I'm focusing on in the coming months. I do have one more question for you, Nick, and this is probably the best question of the day. Um, what is next for HCS coverage, and what are you currently looking at?
Sure. Yeah, it is fun to sit back and brainstorm. I love doing that with you. I love just putting things up on a whiteboard and really thinking about, how can we continue to impact and help people get information. And for us, a couple of big safety issues are both the mold in the classroom as well as ventilation. I think those are two issues that go even beyond what we're dealing with COVID-19, that those things are looked at, and what does the schedule look like, and making sure that people understand what's being done. I think that there's some current unrest with some litigation that's against the district that we're going to look into from a broader perspective. I think that will be impactful, and I think people will learn a lot through that. I think that a big issue that's come up over the last week and a half is obviously the HCS school board chairman is now running for Congress. And so I think that, as I mentioned earlier, school board accountability, we're going to make sure that that the time that he needs to spend with HCS is spent with HCS, and that we monitor that and we hold him responsible for that. I know in many ways Ken will be, he'll answer our phone calls and he will tell us what he's doing. And we're going to make sure we stay on top of that, because it's important, because it's easy to get distracted by a big time race that he's, going to go up against Rep. Tom Rice. And that's going to be something that will take a lot of his time. So we're going to make sure that, the focus is on the school system as well. And then, I don't think this is a shock to anybody, but I think that the welfare of employees is something that we're going to continue to look at. Obviously, there's a lot of action behind the scenes in terms of every level of employee upset with how they're treated. And so we're going to, really dive deep into how that impacts our students too. And then finally, really looking at, is the curriculum in South Carolina, specifically HCS, but then looking at from a statewide level, is it good enough for our children? Ranked number 48 in the country isn't something that anybody should be proud of, but we need to break it down in a black and white situation in terms of maybe where some of the gaps are to make sure that our children are learning the way they need to. And so, before we get going, I know we're almost at time. I do see some questions in there. I'm going to go through them. Some we might not have answers to, but we can definitely speak to the fact of what we're doing to address them. No, at 4:30, you can bail if you want to, but we're going to continue on and answer these questions. I think that's super important. So if you had questions now, please do pop them in there. We love this feedback, and that's what I think Hannah will back me up on this. We want your emails. We want your phone calls. We want you to tell us something that we need to look into, even if you're not experiencing it yourself. We need all of those leads, because that's how it leads us to powerful journalism that can actually make change, or at least give people information that is needed in real time. So let me look at these questions real quick. There's one from Corey. Can plexiglass grow mold? Yes, it can. But I think the bigger concern, and something that I'm working on now, is the flammability of plexiglass. It is, all plastic is a fire hazard. And I think there are other issues in terms of how children are able to navigate the plexiglass in an emergency situation that we will be looking into. One aspect that came up from a reader today, which was a great point, is, what about active shooter drills and real life situations? The plexiglass is not exactly sound. It does move quite easily. And so that could be a potential hazard for a student and for a teacher and for a school. So we will be looking into that. Let's see here. We need to talk about the teachers who have been quarantined once already for 24 days and are now facing another 24 days. They are out of sick days and are being docked pay. That is definitely an issue, and you're not the first person to bring that up. I actively know quite a few teachers who are dealing with that exact same situation. And it is something that we will be asking the district about the CARES Act money that came in and whether or not it can be used for that. I know that they require some documentation in order to use that money. I don't know about the time period it takes to actually get it or what the approval process looks like. But that will definitely be something that we're going to follow up on to make sure that those teachers and employees that are dealing with that get the answers that they deserve. All right. Hannah, I'm going to throw this one to you. How is the district getting away with not following CDC recommendations?
I really don't know the answer to that.
And you know what? I think that was a little bit of a nobody knows. And so actually one thing I can give you a little bit of breaking news is that the CDC actually is going to announce new rules tomorrow about returning to school. And so I feel like after tomorrow, we'll have a better glimpse as to what they're requiring. We have some backroom banter that is there, but I'm not gonna make that public because it's not confirmed. But I do believe after tomorrow, we'll know exactly what those rules look like. And then I believe that we'll have a blueprint in order to hold people accountable for what they're supposed to do. Hold on one second. How is it legal to ask for money for public info? That is a great question. It is legal. Hannah will, and Hannah, please do jump in. Obviously, you're dealing with the current FOIA situation. It is a legal process. This is the way the state works in terms of requesting public information. Some places are better than others about providing it without having to go to these links, and some others definitely utilize the timeline that is allowed. But it is a legal process. Hannah, you have anything to add there?
I don't think so. I mean, I guess I could kind of see it being like a tax, like it takes a while to get this information. And so they have to charge for their time and printing costs if that's a factor.
And one thing we'll say, yeah, obviously we're dealing with a dramatic number. Most FOIA requests are between $12 and $20, and those we obviously do. We've done a ton of them, and we'll continue to do so because the information we acquire is very important for our reader. And so it's a cost of things, a business. Just sometimes it gets to be a number where we have to justify that cost, and that's where we're looking to the community to help us out a little bit because we believe this information is critical. Let's see here. How can I stay connected with all of this if I can't afford the $3 weekly charge for a digital sub? Okay, so some breaking news here. We're actually going to launch in early March a education newsletter specifically for everything that Hannah, myself, as well as Georgetown County with Demi Lawrence. We're going to launch a newsletter in that first week. And so that newsletter is free and there'll be a lot of information in there. Obviously, you get a couple free clicks a month. And after that, the weekly sub is there. What I hope that between Hannah and myself and the rest of the staff is that over time, the $3 a week will be something that is well worth your time. But I know that as in with any business, we have to earn your trust first. And we are doing that daily. I appreciate the fact that, $3 a week is something everybody has to think about. And we do have a great sale going on right now. It is 50% off. So if you want to take advantage of that, it definitely is not $3 a week. I believe it averages out to around $2. Don't know that exact number off the top of my head, but it is definitely much cheaper at this moment. So I believe we're calling it, I believe we're theming it around Valentine's Day right now. Okay, so, actually, Hannah, this question is a lot about what you dealt with at the outset. I'd like to know why the district wasted time at the beginning of the year creating a plan that they didn't follow.
Yeah, that's a interesting question. I'm not sure what went behind the district waiting several months into the school year to get that started. I think, if I'm correct, Georgetown County Schools had theirs before. So that's definitely a question to ask them why they waited.
And we continue. And the thing is, I feel like most school districts are in a constant state of flux. Some have made definitive decisions and stuck to them, but I know that Horry County hasn't done that. And so we're constantly asking them about why are you doing this and why are you doing that? So we'll circle back on that one for sure. Okay, let's see here. Is there a system of fire inspections for schools that are in unincorporated parts of the county? What do the fire marshals in the municipalities saying about the plexiglass? Well, that's a really good question and actually something we answered, I believe it was last week. There is no inspection of the plexiglass whatsoever. That is confirmed by both the state and HCS. They confirmed that they have not requested one, nor is one happening. We've also connected with the local fire department, HCFR, and they have confirmed that they have not been asked to do one. So all plexiglass that is installed currently has not been inspected by a fire marshal, which obviously a couple of parental groups have taken exception to because of the safety that's involved there. All right. Who benefits financially from the mass purchase of plexiglass? That is something that we're looking into. I don't know that necessarily anybody benefits. I don't want to opine on that, but we are making sure that those who have been hired to do the work are above board and that that work is being done properly. Last week, we obviously reported on some teenagers and others doing work during the school day in middle schools and questioned the background checks necessary to have those folks in school. Didn't get many answers from the district, but we were able to gather a lot of information. And so we will continue to push on that, especially now with the March 15th deadline that they want to have all middle schools and high schools done. It'll be a very hot button issue for the next month or so. All right. You know, Hannah, I'm going to throw us both some love. I thank you, Pink 5007. I like that name, by the way. Isn't a question, just so happy to have you all in our area. This is long overdue in our county. As a native New Yorker, I believe this type of journalism is needed in our here. Thank you. And it's that support that definitely keeps us grinding to make sure that we get you guys information as fast as we possibly can. We enjoy it. We don't always enjoy the reason why we're having to report, but we very much enjoy making sure that you guys are informed. We believe that education, there's not much more important than education, and that we need to stay committed to making sure that our area is the best of the best. Okay. Let's see here. Why does the school district not release the 3 of students that have been?
That means the number of students that have been quarantined.
Number of students that have been quarantined. Well, and to jump in, I've been told that they don't have an accurate number. Most other school districts do release that number. They have chosen not to. They feel like it's a moving target. Again, that's what they've told us. Other districts feel the same, but they still do release the number, including Georgetown County. Hannah, you have anything to add there?
No, that was what I was going to answer. Yeah.
Is there an agency that governs school boards in the state? Who do we go to with concerns regarding board decisions and actions? I mean, ultimately, they do report to Governor McMaster and Molly Spearman. So that's something that if you have higher issues, that needs to be taken up the ladder. But you know, my suggestion in terms of what I've seen work this semester is going directly to the board. You know, I would go directly to the district office too and put in your lodge your complaints or your concerns. There's also public comment at every school board meeting, something that has been utilized sparingly over the last 5 months, obviously for health reasons, I know from those folks. That's the time also to speak out if that's what you need to do. Let's see here. I'm going to go back up to the top. Give me 1 second. Technology. Have you looked at all the efforts made to reach out to and work with families who don't speak English as a primary language as part of the virtual program, especially in terms of the opt-in that we had at the beginning of the year? This seems like it has been a challenge. It has definitely been a challenge. You know, that goes back to, you know, which teachers are being assigned to HCS virtual and which ones are being assigned to brick and mortar. Where's the priority? Who's being prioritized? You know, I do know that many teachers weren't given an option as to where they wanted to go. And so some of that skill might have been put in the wrong place. And so I think that I know that after the first semester that HCS virtual was making some changes in terms of structure. They were very much making it up as they go. And that's to be expected. They bought the system over the summer. And I know even just from personal experience that the second semester had started smoother. But the English as a second language is something that we definitely will be circling back on, because that was actually one of the primary issues in that first parental story we did right after they announced, was that some of that was not being taken into account. So it's good to know that that is still an issue, and it is something that we will question the district about. Let's see here. SCDHEC numbers of cases in schools are inconsistent with numbers from HCS and other districts. How can HCS justify the guidance from the SCDHEC? Has anyone questioned this? Both Hannah and I have. We see the inconsistencies too. The one thing that I believe HCS will continue to say is that their numbers are based off of self-reporting. So therefore, it's not going to be a 100% accurate depiction. And obviously, we don't see the student numbers. So no matter what, we're not going to see transparent numbers from them. They provide what is given to them, but schools aren't testing. Schools aren't checking temperatures coming in through the door. There's none of that where they can monitor themselves. So they are reliant upon third-party information, as well as not reporting the students. Hannah, you have anything to add there?
I don't think so.
Was the school district allowed to pick something besides plexiglass? To our understanding, no. That has not been made available to us, that they had another option. I do know that they were advised to make sure that masking continued and social distancing continued. And videos that I got as late as yesterday, I'm seeing that in high schools, that 3 feet is not even being followed. I would cast it as 18 inches with plexiglass that is falling over on top of desktops. So those rules are not being followed. Do you still need inside employees to come forward? If so, how do you guarantee anonymity? We try to keep things, without the anonymity if we can. There are situations where I know that protection is necessary, and so we take that on a case-by-case basis. It's important to us that we put a voice, a name behind the voice, but there are times where we understand the danger that is there. And that goes across the board, both sides. And obviously right now there are sides, as much as I think all of us wish there weren't. But I think it's a conversation to be had. I've had people who initially were anonymous and eventually became great sources for both Hannah and I, that led us in the right direction. It wasn't necessarily about their voice or their quotes, but it was about information that we needed in order to go and do the reporting that we're paid to do. So in many ways, the conversations can lead us to something where everybody is safe. But again, we don't ever want to cost anybody a job. We don't want to cause any problems within the walls of these schools when everybody's dealing with the pandemic already, and there's so many obstacles already there. The last thing we want to do is cause another headache. But that information is absolutely critical. All right. I know for a fact our schools are not being cleaned per guidelines. Who is ultimately responsible for follow-up inspection of our schools to ensure the schools are cleaned appropriately? That would be on Horry County Schools itself. They are responsible for the cleaning. They ask the schools to, they sent down some rules down to the school level. But ultimately, Horry County Schools is responsible for making sure that the schools are cleaned properly. So they would be who to reach out to about something that you're not seeing. If it's a conversation you'd like to have with Hannah or I, we obviously would love to chat, and please do feel free to reach out to us. And I believe that was the end of our questions there. And those were fantastic questions. And like I said, we probably had 30 to 40 that were submitted prior to this. And I plan to get back to all of you. I have contact information. Those things, some of the questions you guys asked in there spurred different ideas for both Hannah and I. And so we're going to follow up on that. But again, I think the most important thing I can leave you with is that we are doing this down the middle. We understand that there are people who have to make decisions and there's people that have to live with the decisions. And both of those people need to be heard, but we have to make sure that the full 360-degree picture is being shown. And at times that has not been possible, but at the Post and Courier, we believe in making sure that that's possible. So I know that I'm incredibly proud of the work that Hannah did. I'm incredibly proud to pick up that baton that she started running with. And now we get to work in tandem with not only showing what's happening now, but what's going to happen in the future. And that's super exciting to us. And coming from a family of educators to be able to work hand in hand with the school system is exciting. And I believe that we will get through the pandemic, and I believe that we'll get back to some issues that truly are long-term, and that we might be able to help people out. So Hannah, do you have any last words for everybody?
I don't think so. Just thank you all again for being here today and taking time out of your afternoon to hear us discuss Horry County Schools.
Cool. So last thing, actually, thank you for the commenter there. If you want to reach us, my email, I'm on 24/7. My wife hates it, but I'm on 24/7. Masuda@postandcourier.com. Hannah's at hstrong@postandcourier.com. We can't wait to hear from you. Please do send everything and anything our way. We will do our best with it, and we respect the time that you give us. We want to make sure to give you that in return. So thank you for tuning in. We'll be back every 4 weeks with a different topic. I know Hannah's going to be back on soon to talk specifically about growth. We can't wait to have you back, and thank you for tuning in.